A husband who abandoned his wife and two sons deeply regretted it years later when he found out they had inherited a fortune and become rich. The worst part about regret is how quiet it is. It doesn't scream at you. It's a low hum in the back of your head, a constant static that you learn to live with. For 12 years, that hum was my daily soundtrack. It was the background noise to the clank of my tools at the warehouse, the drone of the engine in my beat-up pickup truck, and the dead silence of my one-bedroom apartment. My name is Jake, and 12 years ago, I walked out on my wife Sarah and our two sons Liam and Noah. They were 7 and 5. I can still see their faces from that last morning. Liam, a serious little man, looked at my duffel bag by the door with a confused wrinkle in his forehead. Noah was still half asleep, clutching a worn-out Captain America action figure, his hair a messy halo. I knelt and told them I had to go away for work, a lie so thin it was transparent. I kissed their foreheads, the skin soft and smelling of sleep and pancake syrup. Sarah stood in the doorway to the kitchen, her arms crossed, her face a blank mask. We'd already had the big fight the night before. All the tears were gone, all the shouting was done. All that was left was the hollow echo. "You're really doing this?" she whispered. "They'll be better off, Sarah," I'd said, trying to convince myself more than her. "I'm a boat anchor. I'm dragging you all down." We were struggling, badly. My hours at the construction site had been cut. Her part-time job as a receptionist barely covered groceries. The rent on our tiny two-bedroom apartment was always late. The air was thick with stress. I convinced myself that leaving wasn't an act of cowardice, but a strange, twisted kind of sacrifice. If I wasn't there, I was one less mouth to feed, one less burden. It was the story I told myself every single day for 12 years. I moved a few states over, from Pennsylvania to Ohio, got a job driving a forklift, and settled into a life of quiet anonymity. I sent money for the first year, small amounts in unsigned money orders. Then I stopped. It was easier to pretend they didn't exist than to face the constant reminder of what I had abandoned. The hum of regret grew a little louder, but I learned to ignore it. Life became a simple, gray routine. Wake up, go to work, come home, eat a frozen dinner, watch TV, sleep. Repeat. The calendar pages turned, and my sons grew up in my imagination, their faces frozen at 7 and 5. The dam of my denial finally broke on a Tuesday in October. It was the 12th anniversary of the day I left. The date hit me like a punch to the gut when I saw it on the break room calendar at work. 12 years. Liam would be 19 now, a man. Noah would be 17, a senior in high school. The hum of regret suddenly became a roaring siren. For the first time, the loneliness wasn't just a dull ache, it was a physical pain. I sat in my truck after my shift, staring at the peeling paint on the dashboard, and a desperate, clawing need rose up in me. I had to know. I had to see them. I told myself it wasn't about me. It was about them. I just wanted to know they were okay. I needed to know that my leaving hadn't ruined their lives. That's what I told myself. It was one more lie in a long line of them. The truth was, my own life was a ruin, and I was looking for a single piece of evidence that I hadn't destroyed everything I once touched. I took the next day off, filled the tank of my old Ford, and started driving east, back toward a life I had thrown away. The 8-hour drive back to Westlake, Pennsylvania, felt like a journey through time. I kept expecting to see things as I'd left them, but the world had moved on. The old diner where Sarah and I had our first date was now a smoothie shop. The movie theater was boarded up. My hands felt clammy on the steering wheel as I turned onto our old street. My heart hammered against my ribs when I saw our old apartment building. But the car I pulled up behind wasn't my rusted-out sedan. It was a brand-new minivan. A kid's bike lay on the patch of grass out front. I watched for a moment as a young family, a man and a woman with a little girl, walked out the front door. They were laughing. The woman had planted yellow mums in the window box, the same kind Sarah always wanted but we could never afford. A thick, bitter lump formed in my throat. They were gone. Of course they were gone. What did I expect? That they'd wait for me in that place of bad memories? My search started there, feeling foolish and lost. I didn't have a phone number. I tried looking up Sarah's name, Sarah Miller, online. But it was like searching for a single grain of sand on a beach. There were hundreds. I didn't know if she had remarried and changed her name. The thought sent a sharp, jealous pang through me, which was ridiculous. I had no right to feel that way. Panic began to set in. What if they'd moved across the country? What if I could never find them? Then a name popped into my head. Jessica Thorne. Sarah's best friend. They were inseparable. My fingers trembled as I typed her name into the search bar of a social media site. Her profile popped up immediately, her picture showing the same wide, friendly smile I remembered. Her page was open to the public. I felt like a stalker, a ghost peering into a world I didn't belong in. I scrolled through years of photos, pictures of her kids, family vacations, birthday parties. My breath caught. I scrolled back up to a photo from 6 months ago at a child's birthday party. In the background, leaning against a tree, was Sarah. I zoomed in, my heart pounding. It was her, but not. The tired, stressed lines around her eyes were gone. Her hair was styled, she was wearing a simple but elegant blue dress, and she looked radiant, peaceful. Beside her stood 2 tall, lanky teenagers. The older one had my dark hair and a serious expression, his arm draped protectively around his mom's shoulders. The younger one was smiling, a flash of bright teeth, with Sarah's lighter hair and easygoing energy. Liam and Noah, my sons. They were handsome, healthy. They looked happy. Relief washed over me so intensely it made me dizzy. They were okay. They were more than okay. I scrolled down to the comments, desperate for more information. "So great to see you all," one comment read. "Ridgewood suits you, Sarah." Another one said, "Your new place is just gorgeous." Ridgewood. I knew Ridgewood. It was an old-money suburb about 30 miles outside the city, a place where doctors and lawyers lived. The houses there didn't have yards, they had grounds. It was a world away from the cramped, run-down neighborhood we had lived in. My mind started racing. How? How could she afford to live in Ridgewood? The only answer my brain could supply was the one I dreaded. She'd met someone, a wealthy man who had given her and the boys the life I never could. The relief I'd felt moments before curdled into a sour mix of jealousy and shame. The next day, I drove to Ridgewood. The difference was jarring. My sputtering Ford felt like a garbage truck cruising past the rows of silent, gleaming Teslas and BMWs. The houses were set far back from the road, behemoths of brick and stone with perfectly manicured lawns that looked like green velvet carpets. I had no address, no plan. I just drove, scanning the palatial homes, feeling more and more like an intruder. I parked near a small, pristine park and watched kids in expensive sportswear playing lacrosse. What was I even doing here? Was I going to knock on a stranger's door and ask if my ex-wife lived there? As I was about to give up and drive away, I saw them. 2 teenagers walking down the sidewalk, tossing a football back and forth. Even from a distance, I recognized their gait, the shape of their shoulders. It was Liam and Noah, my sons. They were laughing, easy and carefree. I watched, frozen, as they turned up a long, curving driveway. My eyes followed the driveway up to the house. It wasn't a house, it was an estate, a 3-story brick mansion with white columns, a slate roof, and a fountain in the circular drive. A gardener was trimming hedges near the front gate. I just sat there in my truck, staring. My mind couldn't process it. This wasn't just doing okay. This wasn't, she married a decent guy. This was a fortune. This was a different universe. For the next 2 days, I did something I'm ashamed of. I staked them out. From a distance, parked on a side street, I watched. I saw Sarah pull out of the 3-car garage in a new pearl-white SUV. I saw the boys get picked up by a bus that had the name of a prestigious private academy on the side. Every detail was another stab to my heart. The story I had told myself for 12 years that I'd left to give them a better chance crumbled into dust. I hadn't set them free. I had abandoned them to a life of struggle, and by some miracle I couldn't comprehend, they had not only survived, They had ascended to a place I couldn't even dream of. The regret was no longer a low hum. It was a physical weight, crushing the air from my lungs. The shame was so profound it made me sick to my stomach. I hadn't just missed their childhoods, I had missed their transformation. I had traded a kingdom for a hovel, and I hadn't even known it. I couldn't just leave. The not knowing was eating me alive. How did this happen? The question burned in my mind, a singular obsession. I had to talk to her. I had to stand in front of her and hear it. After days of watching and waiting, I finally got my nerve up. It was a Saturday morning. I remembered she used to love gardening on weekends. I parked my truck a block away and walked, my work boots feeling heavy and clumsy on the clean, perfect sidewalk. Each step up their long, stone-paved driveway felt like a mile. My heart was a drum against my ribs. The air smelled of fresh-cut grass and roses, and then I saw her. She was kneeling by a flower bed, wearing a wide-brimmed sun hat and gardening gloves, tending to a row of vibrant red tulips. She looked up as my shadow fell across the flowers. Her eyes met mine. There was no shock on her face, no anger, just a deep, profound weariness. A flicker of recognition, as if she were looking at a ghost she had long ago stopped expecting. "Jake," she said. Her voice wasn't a question, it was a statement, flat and calm. It was more devastating than if she had screamed. The sound of the back door sliding open made us both turn.
"Mom? Who is this?"
It was Liam. He was taller than me now, broad-shouldered, with an intensity in his stare that was all me. He instinctively moved to stand slightly in front of Sarah, a human shield. Noah hovered behind him, his expression more curious than hostile. He tilted his head, studying my face. This strange man who looked vaguely familiar, like a character from a movie he'd seen a long time ago. Sarah stood up, pulling off her gloves slowly. She never broke eye contact with me. "Boys," she said, her voice steady as a rock, "this is your father." The air went dead still. A bird chirped somewhere, a sound that felt impossibly loud in the crushing silence. Liam's face hardened, disbelief turning to a cold, quiet contempt. Noah just stared, his mouth slightly open. I opened my own mouth to say something, to deliver the apology I'd been rehearsing for the entire drive, but the words wouldn't come. "I'm sorry" felt like offering a Band-Aid for a severed limb. Standing there in my faded jeans and worn-out t-shirt, smelling of stale truck cab air, I looked from my calloused hands to their clean, prosperous lives. I was a relic from a forgotten archaeological dig, a fossil from a past they had successfully escaped. This wasn't a reunion, it was an intrusion. Sarah saw the pathetic apology crumbling on my lips before I ever uttered it. She let out a slow breath. "Let's not do this out here," she said, her voice low, glancing toward a neighboring mansion. She led the way around the side of the house to a sprawling stone patio overlooking a massive, sparkling blue pool. The boys followed like silent guards, their eyes tracking my every move. I sat down hesitantly in a cushioned patio chair that probably cost more than my entire living room set. You're all doing so well," I stammered, gesturing vaguely at the opulence around us. It was the stupidest thing I could have possibly said. "We're fine, Jake," Sarah said, her voice still unnervingly calm. "We're more than fine." I had to ask. The question was a physical thing, a ball of hot lead in my gut. "How, Sarah? All this, did you remarry?" I braced myself for the answer, for the name of the man who had succeeded where I had so spectacularly failed. For the first time, a flicker of emotion crossed her face. It was a short, sharp, humorless laugh. "No, Jake, I never did. After you, I decided I wasn't going to risk bringing another man into my son's lives, just to have him walk out when things got hard." The words were delivered without malice, but they hit me like a physical blow. "Then, how?" She took a sip from a glass of iced tea that had been sitting on the table. "You remember my great-uncle Walter, the one in Oregon, lived in a cabin, barely spoke to anyone?" I vaguely recalled a reclusive old relative she'd mentioned once or twice. "He passed away about 8 years ago. Turns out, back in the late 70s, he gave a friend a few $1,000s to start some little computer company in his garage. He forgot all about it. He never married, never had kids. I was his last living relative. He left everything to me." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "The letter from his lawyer showed up 4 years after you left. 4 years, Jake." Her voice dropped, and the calmness was finally replaced by a steely edge. "Do you have any idea what those 4 years were like? I worked 2 jobs. I cleaned houses at night after my receptionist shift. There were nights the boys and I shared a can of soup for dinner. I sold my wedding ring for $50 to keep the lights on. I was terrified every single day that we would end up on the street. It was the hardest, bleakest time of my life." She leaned forward slightly. "You weren't there for any of that. You chose not to be, so you don't get to be here for this." It wasn't an accusation, it was a verdict. My son Liam, who had been silent, finally spoke, his voice low and shaking with anger. "Mom did it all. She got us through it. You did nothing. You have no right to be here." I had nothing to say. There was no defense. He was right. It wasn't a lottery ticket. It was a reward. A reward for endurance, for loyalty, for a mother's love. And it had been given to the only person who had earned it. The money hadn't erased the struggle, it had sanctified it. And I, the man who had caused the struggle, had no part in it. The fortune wasn't the story. The 4 years she had survived without me, that was the story. The money was just the epilogue. The walk back down that long, perfect driveway was the loneliest walk of my life. Every stone seemed to mock me. Every perfectly pruned rose bush felt like a testament to a life I had not only failed to provide but had actively run from. I got into my truck, the torn vinyl of the seat cold against my legs. I glanced in my rearview mirror and saw them standing on the lawn. Sarah had her arms around her 2 sons, pulling them into a tight hug. A fortress of 3, strong, complete, and utterly impenetrable. As I drove away from Ridgewood, away from the life that should have been mine, the full weight of my pathetic choice crashed down on me. It was never about the money. The mansion, the cars, the private school, that was all just scenery. What I had thrown away was the life itself. The 12 years of birthdays, the Christmases, the first broken arm, the first school dance, the first heartbreak. I hadn't just walked out on an empty bank account. I had walked out on the unique, unrepeatable privilege of watching my children grow up. In my selfish panic, I had convinced myself I was an anchor weighing them down. The devastating truth was, they were my anchor, my only one, and I had cut the line myself, setting myself adrift in a meaningless ocean. I thought I was escaping a sinking ship, but I had jumped overboard from a vessel that was destined for a golden shore. I had thrown away the winning ticket 12 years ago, never realizing it wasn't a piece of paper, but the feeling of a small hand in mine and the sound of my family's laughter.